Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. My name is Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning, and today I'm joined by Vicki Hicks. Vicki is one of the founders and group CEO of Mello, which was previously the Exit Partnership, a business life cycle support company, and one of the leading merger and acquisitions firms. Vicki's driving force for setting up Mello was the fact she didn't want others to experience the negative experiences she had when selling her own chartered financial planning firm in 2018. She's worked now in financial planning for over 17 years and has added public speaking to her resume as well. Welcome, Vicki, and thank you for joining me today.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we're here to talk about money, but do you want to add anything just to your introduction to tell people a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so Mello works specifically with financial planning firms. So it's always been my background. I love financial planning, not just for the career that it gave me, but also just for all of the benefits that it can bring at a societal level. And it's a thing that I'm really passionate about. And when my own business was sold, that wasn't me ending my career as a financial planner. We all went forwards in, positively, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. So still loving the profession, I needed to pivot and do something different. And like you said in sort of your opening, I wanted to help other financial planning firm owners to not make the same mistakes that we did. Everybody exits at the end of the day, and you want to have people on your team who are going to help you to find the right exit. So that's what we do. We work with firms from a sort of a real world position of understanding them. And then around a year ago, I merged with a couple of other businesses to create Mello. So now whether firms are growing or going, we're here to support them to build the best business that they can.
Excellent. Great. Well, and I know that people can find, I know that you're taking over one of the kind of well-known financial advisor, Facebook groups as well. So, but if people do want to hear more about Mello, where's the best place to go initially to find out more about what you do?
So they could go to our website, which is mello.co.uk. We're very active on LinkedIn as well, so people can follow me on LinkedIn or follow the company page. But actually, Life Talk is just a brilliant resource for financial planners. So you're right, it's one of the oldest and most active communities of financial planners in the UK. I think we've got about 4,200 members, something like that at the moment. And it is very much a member-run community. Any given day, there might be 20 to 30 different posts on there that financial planning experts will put on. Such a range of topics as well. And it's just amazing in such a fragmented profession to have a platform that like so many people value, and to see all of the support and guidance and education that it gives to so many is just amazing. So anyone who's in financial planning, and if you're on Facebook as well, I'd really recommend joining the Life Talk community because you'll feel like you found her.
Yeah, absolutely. So one for our financial planners out there for sure. So Women Talking Money is all about us just opening up conversations around money and sharing our experiences throughout life, all of which are different, to kind of just make sure that we're all just talking about it more. So can you share with us maybe some of your first memories of money and how you think it might have shaped your views today, either positively or negatively?
It's interesting, isn't it, how like we all do start with this financial blueprint. It is something that I've been looking into myself to kind of work out and understand how that shapes a person. But thinking back to sort of my childhood, I mean, it was the early 90s, Gretchen, not the early noughties. The early 90s, there wasn't much going on. And every single summer I used to go over and I'd stay with my grandparents. And they lived in a little village in the Lake District called Dalton, in fairness. And the most exciting thing that happened one summer was they got new wheelie bins, and it was like the talk of the town, right? So it gives you a little indication as to there wasn't much back in the early 90s. But my nana, every year throughout the year, she had an old Vitalite tub, and she'd wrap it up. It had all these elastic bands wrapped around it, and she'd collect coppers all year. And then when I got there in the summer, I'd put all these coppers into, the little bags, the little pound bags that you'd have and toddle off to the bank. And my nana used to say to me, she said, you'll end up working for a bank one day. She could see how much I enjoyed it. making sure everything was right. And we'd go off to see the teller at the bank, and I'd be nervous. Oh gosh, are they going to weigh up okay? But then, interestingly, my granddad had this passbook, if you remember them. So when you put in your money, they'd print on this passbook how much you'd put in. But then you could also see other entry lines, which was interest. And that was the first time when I was really little. I must have been 7, 8, 9 year old. And my granddad would explain to me how it worked. You fill these bags, we take them to the bank, and then you get more money because you put that money into this account. And I just, ever since then, was fascinated about how it worked, right? And had that level of understanding. And yeah, I got my first job straight after school and in a bank, pleased my nana. And yeah, the rest is history, really. But I do definitely think that those early years shaped me, just having those sorts of conversations about money with my granddad and starting to learn the real basics of how it worked.
That's really interesting. I think you're the first person in, like, this is season 3. I've spoken to quite a lot of people who have a very vivid memory about basically being told about compounded, about interest, you know. So a lot of people have memories of collecting money, maybe going like passbook, you know, or going to the bank, like you say. But the concept that actually it really stuck with you, that made more money,
Yeah.
you know, is really interesting, because I don't know that anyone else has kind of said that's the bit that stuck with me. You know, they've got memories of dealing in cash and, you know, helping in shops and things like that. But the fact that you know, it really clocked with you is so interesting.
It was the first thing I'd do. I'd run in. They had this big dresser in the dining room, and they kept this Vitalite tub in one of the cupboards underneath. And it was the first thing I'd do. I'd run in, I'd get it out. And when you filled a 5p bag, that was next level. You needed like £5 to fill a 5p bag. You know, then you were really going some. But yeah, like it, as I said, it was a different time back then, and I think, you know, you could really get involved in things, and you could really enjoy the simplicity of life back then. You know, now there is so much, isn't there, to entertain, or so many other things that you could be doing. You know, now as a child, would I have had that same experience? I don't know, but I did, and it stuck with me because it wasn't just a thing I did. It was a thing like genuinely enjoyed, you know, probably because they took me to Asda for my breakfast afterwards as well. So like, it was a whole event that went around it.
Yeah. Linked with a reward. So, I mean, you've spoken about your granddad, but was there a specific person or an event that you can look back at that you think influenced your relationship with money? Or is it that, or is there anything else you could think of?
Now, I've always had an awareness of money, so I've always been taught about the value of money. My parents' upbringing was very different to mine. So they had quite a challenging upbringing. My dad, both of his parents passed away by the time he was 12. So he was raised by his sister, and they really didn't have very much. And my dad used to tell me this tale, because they lived in a church village, and he used to talk about the neighbours who would bring round sort of leftover food after they'd finished their Sunday lunch and stuff like that. And all he ever wanted was to be able to buy a car. And so once he kind of got into his own groove as an adult, and he got a job and he bought a car and he bought a house, for him it was all about protection and protecting everything, because he'd never had that security before, and he didn't want that security to disappear. And he understood, I suppose, how easy it could be for that to go. Despite that, I'm completely like the opposite end of the risk spectrum to my dad. You know, I learned some lessons there for sure around like the importance of, I suppose, monitoring where you are financially and making sure that you don't make silly decisions. So I'm a good saver, which has come from both of my parents. But I am also quite a risky person going into business, and I angel invest for a few people that I know as well into their businesses. So on the risk spectrum, I'm definitely very different growing up in that sort of environment where, you know, they'd worked so hard for everything. I respected like the money, if that makes sense. And I went to school in Harrogate. I got to about 13, 14 years old. And my parents had enough, but they didn't have loads. And because I was very conscious that I didn't want to put on them, I decided, well, if I want to go out, if I want to go to the cinema with my friends, if I want to go out for meals, then I've got to work. So from being like 14, I remember going off to the shops, finding the little job adverts, in the window and stuff. And I worked. And that's really shaped my relationship with money as well, because I always saw money and freedom as going hand in hand with one another. If I want to go out with my friends, then I need to work, and therefore I need money. If I want to go to university, I need to take I had a gap year before university and worked so I could save so that I could go to uni. So that work ethic that I sort of have in me as well, and that, I suppose, coming from that sort of cautious environment when it comes to money, definitely did shape me. But then I think it can push you one of two ways. You can either become very cautious yourself, can't you, because of the lessons you've learned, or you could maybe go the opposite way. And I try to balance the two.
You could rebel, potentially rebel what you've been told or taught. So do you think, though, that, because you said I always felt like I had to, or as a 14-year-old, if I wanted to enjoy myself, I would go and earn that money. Do you think, though, that that's something you'd learnt because of the messaging from your mum and dad?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. They always just encouraged me, to be what I wanted to be and to do what I wanted to do. Yeah, it's all I've ever known, and sometimes I'm trying to encourage the same, like, of our lads as well. So our eldest is 20, our youngest is 14. Our youngest, I'm trying to get him to start to think about work and start thinking about earning money. And the eldest, as soon as he could, he was working on weekends as well. So, we do have like that kind of strong work ethic that flows across the family.
Yeah. And so now, where you are now with everything, how would you describe your current relationship with money? If I asked for like maybe one word, and why would you use that word?
Aware is what I would say. If I had to come up with one word that summarises, no, awareness. I've got an awareness of money. I'm very lucky to have been taught to understand money and how money works, not just from my youth, but through the career that I've had as well. I know what I want to achieve from my career, and therefore that's going to take a lot of investment. So I have an awareness right now that, I can't just strip out everything that I'm earning. It's like I'm trying to balance where we are today with where I want to be in the future. And I do always have like my dad in mind as well. And he's always talked about, if something happens to like one of you in a house, are you still going to be okay? And so I try to sort of live to that mantra as well. So I'm not, I'm not flash. I don't need like a new car or a bigger house and stuff like that. And I'm not criticizing, by the way, anybody and how they want to spend their money. I think I just have that awareness of what money is and what money can do depending on where it is.
Yeah, I like that. And do you think that you talked earlier about, working when you were younger to earn money, to have that freedom money? Do you think that money, therefore, has played a role when it comes to thinking about your career choices or what options you take or opportunities you take?
Yeah, I think it still sticks in my mind what my nana said, she'll work in a bank one day. And that interest did carry through. As soon as I finished school, I went to work for the National Australia Bank Group. And then when I was going through university, I was a cashier at a Halifax branch in Didsbury. I used to love it. Like, you'd put on, your little like jacket and stuff like that and toddle off on a Saturday. And yeah, like, I always knew that I would work with and sort of in finance. I didn't think I would become a financial advisor. And I think that's because nobody really knows what a financial advisor is. That's another thing we've got to shout it, haven't we, as loud as we can, because it's such an amazing profession for people to get into. And that part of my career was by accident. So I was working for Northern Rock, And it was just at the start of the credit crunch back in 2007. And obviously, Northern Rock was one of the first ones to be impacted by that. So they made redundancies. And I had a friend's dad who was a financial advisor. And he said, let me put you in touch with my boss. I think you'd be really good at what we do. But that was more, not so much because he knew my interest in finance, that was more because he knew my interest in chatting.
Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
chat away to him, whenever I went over to my mate's house and stuff, I'd chat away to him, chat away to friend, whoever was in the house with them. And he was like, you've just got like quite a good way with people. I think you'd be good at doing what I do. And yeah, that the rest, I thought I'd be a financial advisor forever. It was only because the business was sold that I had to pivot my career into something else. But it's an amazing career. It really is.
Do you think that money, though, I guess, motivated some of, so you've got an interest in money, but do you think physically earning the money motivated career options you've taken?
Yes. It's a really hard one to try and work out, like your motivations with money, because I'm not a materialistic person. So I don't need money to have things, but I do enjoy earning and making money. And what I've always known is you're going to earn money if you do a good job, And so that actually is what kind of powers me on, just be amazing and be the best that you can be. And then naturally the financial rewards will come with that. And yeah, I don't know if it's the motive. Some people sort of sit down when they're in uni and stuff, and they'll go, "What career could I do where I could make the most money possible?" And I didn't think, going down a career in financial planning because I want to make as much money as possible. But I did know that I would make a good living, and also that I would have probably quite a lot of stability because I would always have a job. And then naturally that brings the money and the financial stability and everything else that you're looking for. So I think ultimately what I am looking for is stability. And, first and foremost, it's those foundations. I want to know that I don't have to make ridiculous decisions, or if something did happen to somebody in my family, I'd have that time to just sort of step back. But now I'm on a bit of a quest for freedom. So at the moment, I'm working like crazy because we've recently started a new business and we've got a lot of intense years ahead of us. But I do also want to try and shorten my career because I do crave what this is all about to me, which is making enough to have complete freedom where, I really can wake up every single morning and say, what do I want to do today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just interesting to see how I would speak to someone who was like so motivated right from the start, like by those pennies, forgetting about it necessarily being in finance, but knowing that the money was quite it was a motivator, but not necessarily, as you've said, for like materialistic things, but it's definitely like that stability thing, which then it's a bit what your dad wanted to, like all those things that we said at the start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, though, I think you change as you go along. I've always been very career, and that is because I want to do well. Like when I started my job at 14, I wanted to run the most people through my till across a day. I wanted my till to balance to exactly the penny, and I'd have like a little bag of pennies in my pocket just in case it didn't, like things like that, right? So I've always had this motivation to like do really well and be better. And now when I say to some of my friends, I do want to shorten my career, I do think that I'll do, I don't know what I'll do, but I'll do something else in a few years. They're like, no, you won't. Like, you're a worker. What are you on about? You'll never retire. But I do think that something has changed in me over the last couple of years. And I think it's seeing some family members get older. Like, I think you get to 40-ish and you can so clearly see time, if you know what I mean. You can look back and you think, well, as far as I can look back, I've probably only got that looking forwards. This is all getting a bit deep. And that brings me back to like, but there is more outside of all of this. But you need money. You know, at the end of the day, money makes the world go round, right? So that freedom, I sound like a bit of a contradiction, but yeah, that is what I am working to.
Yeah. And it leads me quite nicely onto the next one, which is about, so many people that I talk to, the challenge is balancing like living, hopefully, a fulfilling and rewarding life day to day with saving, balancing that, saving for that end date or saving enough money for the length of time that we don't know how long that length of time is. So are you approaching now in the era that you're in, that kind of balance between that future and enjoying what you've got, day to
Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? And I think, I'm quite fortunate because I do understand money, and I've spent, the last 20 years or so of my career in finance. I have, I've done all right. I've put some money aside, I've done some savings and stuff like that. And I've done my own financial plan. So I know that we'll be okay. And that comes back to some of the calculated risks I've taken, starting new businesses and things like that. Whilst they are still high risk, I have some safeguards elsewhere that will make sure that we still achieve what we want to achieve. Thinking back to my time in financial planning and dealing with clients, like it's so hard because I worry that we've got a generation that's potentially walking into financial catastrophe. Think about my parents' generation. My dad's now, what is he, 70? I think he's just turned. So he worked for a bank as well, and he had a final salary pension. And, by the time he was in his mid-50s, he could retire on his final salary pension. He had his mortgage paid off, and he's all right. And terrified of investing is my dad, absolutely terrified, but he's never had to invest, and he still doesn't have to invest. Whereas what we know is people today, you've got to take a risk probably to get, to earn what you need to earn in retirement. But it's so challenging for people to find that balance because it's so expensive. Everything's so expensive. And auto enrollment is good, right? Because, obviously we needed to do something. But I think it does lull people into a false sense of security that they sort of say, oh, I've got a pension, and it's not enough.
Yeah, and I think, and this has come up a couple of times with people, it's like it's quite multifaceted as well. Because yes, we've got the thing that everything's more expensive, but we've also got this like completely different age where we think about when you and I, we were talking about the 90s and the early noughties, where we're in our kind of formative years, starting to earn, getting jobs and things. We weren't also battling the fact that I mean, as it was hard enough, didn't really get paid enough to pay my rent and do everything that you wanted to do, but escalate that out on social media, on trying to keep up with these amazing trips that people are going on, and holidays just seem to have like escalated. They're no longer, once in a blue moon going to like Europe. You're going like much, further, and there's just so much like kind of, as you said, not particularly materialistic, but I think there's so much pressure now for that the whole thing is completely different. It's not just about like, it's even managing to save if you've got to keep up with all this other stuff that's going on is a really big challenge.
And then I think people just think, oh, well, then what's the point? And I hear that a lot. I hear people saying that a lot. And then I think it's Pretty Little Things. They did like a campaign a year or so ago. And it was like, YOLO, you only live once. YOLO, buy the dress. YOLO, buy the shoes, And you think that is how people are living. Everybody, we just live in like this society where it's buy everything and what's the worst that can happen. And it is that lifestyle creep, isn't it, that people feel. I know a lot of people who are probably like the generation below us, and they feel a little bit disillusioned with it all. And they do feel like, what is the point? Like we're never going to be able to afford a mortgage. So what's the point? And they're, will probably never be able to retire. And yeah, it's going to get challenging, really challenging for people.
Yeah, and there's sort of no magic wands, is there? I mean, how's your, you said that your son's 20. Like, I mean, how's he and his work has worked and is working, but how's he approaching, this? I mean, obviously, it sounds like he's got, amazing backing from you guys and support from you. But yeah, it does play on their minds, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we don't really support him, actually. Hopefully, he won't listen to this, because if he does well, then we will support. And he's working really hard. But actually, we wanted to teach the same lessons that I'd been taught and that my husband had been taught growing up. So it was like, okay, you want to go to uni? That's great. Let's take a look at it. And we helped him pick his course and things. But then it was like, if you want to go, you've got to work in the summer before, save up some money. You've got to, work through the holidays. You've got to take out the student loans. So as far as he's concerned, he is having to earn and having to spend his own money and having to budget as well. So my husband's on to him quite a lot, checking how much have you got and how are you doing? And we'd never let him fall, but he hasn't come to ask, unless it's
No.
been something major like fixing the computer. He hasn't come to ask. And he is more, he was never particularly academic, but he's found in university what he absolutely loves. So he's doing music design, and he's brilliant at it. And all of a sudden, he's gone from, I don't really like school, to being one of the kind of best in his group. But I do wonder whether it is that because he's doing it himself and because he knows, it's costing me money to do this degree, whether that is making him commit more to it. So yeah, one day we will probably help him out. But actually, I
Yeah, I mean, even if it's not, I sort of meant even like emotionally supportive. I didn't necessarily mean financially supporting, but it's quite an interesting one, like to sort of how, yeah, this younger generation are going to kind of motivate themselves, and I mean, to be honest, finding something you love doing is one of those first steps, right? Because you're going to be highly motivated to keep wanting to do that and do it to the best that you can.
Yeah, I do think though, when you have more confidence in yourself as well, that's when you see with some people them becoming less materialistic. I remember getting, like, one of my first employed jobs as a financial advisor, they gave me a car allowance, and it was just like extra income on top of my normal income. But to me, it was a car allowance. I had to go and spend it on a car. And I think I went out and I bought like a Mercedes or something. But the list price on my car was more than my annual salary. But and now I wouldn't do that. And so you do. That's another thing. I do think you change over time, and you do become, a little bit more confident, I suppose, in who you are and what you want. But when you also know what you want to achieve, you stop thinking so much about the short term purchases for that kind of little endorphin. Because actually, I'm working on this bigger thing over here, and that's they need purpose. The young people need purpose, and they need an excitement about what they're going to go forward and do. Like you said, it starts with like doing what they enjoy doing, but it is a shame when you hear so many of them feeling so disillusioned already. And you think, oh my goodness, it took me until I was at least 38 to be beaten down by this world. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, that's quite interesting because one of my questions is if you could give one piece of financial advice to your younger self, what would it be? So maybe it's a good time to slot that in, and that can be our, guidance for, yeah, I guess advice for younger people. Looking back at what you've done and maybe things that did go wrong or things that you got super stressed about. What would that bit of advice be?
Advice. I think I would always say go down the route of like qualifications. Like, I think having some form of trade is really good. And that's where you can move into having more of like a career and a vocation, as opposed to just a job. And often you see people, don't you, sort of changing jobs and things, whereas I think if you commit to something, and that's probably one of the best things that I did when I was younger, through not through choice initially, through being made redundant and kind of coming this route, but they definitely did put me in good stead. And knowing as well that I've always got that to fall back on is important. But I think for younger people, in terms of money, it's really trying to create options for yourself as you go ahead, as you go forward. And we'll know, and you'll know as well, a lot of people who are, unfortunately, they're stuck doing things that maybe they don't want to do, or stuck in jobs that are high pressured and they'd rather be doing something else. But the golden handcuffs have got them. And then they've allowed that lifestyle creep to catch up. And if you're earning £200,000 a year, that doesn't mean you're any more wealthy than somebody who's earning 40,000 a year if you're spending it all. So for me, my advice would be to not look at what you're earning, but look at what you're saving. I think that's the true measure. And then that's that ability to create that freedom that you may want one day, that ability to say, I don't want this job anymore because it's too stressful, or I want to spend some time with my family, or I want to have 9 months off because I'm having a baby. You can only do those things. Those things aren't just gifted to us anymore in this world, and you've got to work for them. So not letting the lifestyle creep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as we will wrap up, I want to sort of ask, what's one thing you want every woman to know or think differently about when it comes to money?
Talk about it more. That's what I would say to the women. I think we need to talk about it more. It's some of the stats out there are shocking, really, and the difference in the amount of pension people, it's not just like kind of the glass ceiling or issues as you go along in your career, but it's the times that we have to have away, it's the reduction in pensions. And I think when you don't work and live in finance like we do, it's not like an interesting topic of conversation that people really want to have going on. I think we can make it interesting. Usually people will only talk about their finances when things have gone wrong, and usually very wrong. And that's the point where the sort of help, and actually if women spoke to each other more just in general about money, about their concerns about money, their relationship with money, then that would prevent, it would help, one, and it would also prevent people from waiting until things have got really bad to put their hand up and ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really fascinating to me that we only, as you say, talk about it when things go wrong, and the amount of people that I speak to who are like, oh no, I wouldn't have that conversation with my friends because they would judge me, or but if they're your friends, like, we need to get over this whole like immediate kind of taboo that we've got that people are going to judge me either badly or in a positive light. Either way, like, we've just got to kind of neutralize that, I think. And the more that we can talk about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I remember I went to I think it was like a PFS event a few years ago, and there was this lady there from one of the fund managers, and she'd flown in from America, and she said she talks about the difference in America. She could jump in a taxi to go somewhere, and the taxi driver will say, "Oh, hey, what do you do?" And she'll say, "Oh, I work in investments," and they'll say, "Oh, what tips have you got?" Or they'll talk about their 4Ks, and it's very open dialogue. And when she gets in a taxi in the UK, they'll say, "What do you do?" Say, "Investments." "Oh, it's like gambling, that, love." And she sort of says the difference just in like the general perception. And it's because we don't talk about it. We need to talk about it more around the dining room table. We need to talk about it more in school. Some of the most brilliant businesses that we work with who are run by we've got firms that are run by people in their 60s, their 70s. We've got firms that are run by people in their 30s, and some of the firms where they're run by people who are younger. I'd ask them similar questions to what you've asked me. Like, how are you doing all this at this young age? And quite often they've grown up in families where they had businesses, so they're used to those dining room table chats. They talk about risk, they talk about reward, they understand it. And so they've just, those formative years you speak about, they've just been wired slightly differently. So we've got to encourage more people in general to talk about this, but we've got to find a way to normalise this sort of conversation from very early.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, how do those conversations also like happen if no one's sitting around a dinner table anymore, or if no one's like, all of those things, like it's mad. But I think, yeah, opening more dialogue maybe at school so that people go home as well and go, oh, in school we learned about this, and, kind of share those things. I think that's, could be really, really important too.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Vicki, for coming on today and talking to me. And obviously, we said earlier about finding the company website and LinkedIn. So we'll make sure we link all that in the show notes so that everyone can find you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you. Great to talk to you as well.